for Jen Barry on the end, Chris Gilbert, Monq on Studio Gen 2, Laura, Studio 6, got it right now, and John, which you all know. Our birds will maybe drop into 5 afterward, and I think we'll be one more halfway through, so but I'll let you say.
Very good afternoon to our esteemed panel and all our friends. Welcome to Studio 15, Machining Aesthetics. Today's presentation will be showing in a non-linear format to describe our multifaceted journey throughout the semester. On the left, we'll be showing theme diagrams and design process that we went through, and on the right will be a linear slide format. 14 of us were divided into 4 teams to begin with, and that's how we started the studio. Machining aesthetics aims to include real-life construction in architectural education. Students gain knowledge through experiential learning and by turning abstract concepts into reality. This ideology was implemented by, this ideology was tested through the making of a pavilion. We'll be describing the whole presentation under 2 main design and practice-based questions, which is what is a pavilion, which is a concept-based inquiry, which we address through case studies and idea workshops, and 2 competition rounds. And at each stage, we start off with 4 pavilion designs, and it cut down to 2, and then after phase 2, the winning pavilion went through and got built. The next question that we will, after phase 2, we will address is what is a digital practice and how do you manage the workflow with 14 students.
So we started with understanding the site. So for a site, we think it's a space for socializing and gathering. And it is very important that it reacts to the users and also the context of the site. So by designing this pavilion, we also looked into how fabrication is done, the structural stability, and also how the installation is carried out outside. So through this process, we'll learn about the material tectonics and also how the workflow of a digital construction will be worked out. So our site is actually the north yard of the new building, which is that under that category you can see over there. And by understanding the site, we have to know about the constraints and also the potentials. So the first site constraint we looked into in this 6x6 cube square site is actually the site level. So the site level from what we looked at visually, we can see that there is flow flowing to the drain next to it. So we carried out a site survey by laying out the grid and then measure it with the spirit levels. And so we identified the crucial section line of our final design afterwards and see what is the range of the level difference. And the highest level difference is actually 65. So another site constraint is actually noise and the power supply. There is no power, so it forces us to use all the electronic device in the workshop instead of working on site. And also the transport to site is also constrained to this route. So the whole construction is actually carried out in the workshop first and then transported to the site itself. And the potentials that we see from the site is actually the circulation of students from the Union House and also the Tinelli. And another potential we see is the visual connection that it has. This is the cantilever and also Tinelli and also to the cafe next to it.
So we had 4 case studies, each assigned to one group. The first case study is the Driftwood Pavilion by AA Design and Make, which we studied how they defined the idea of the threshold and how they created a sense of enclosure by defining the boundary on the eye level. The second case study is the C-Space by DRL10, and what's important about that is that how they create a sense of enclosure by actually not being fully enclosed, and the relationship that the envelope has to the ground. The third case study, the Dunescape by Shop Architects. We studied the triangulation that they use in the structural system and how they incorporated ergonomics into the design. And the last one, the Pavilion by Zaha Hadid, which played with the idea of having a second skin and the structural hierarchy they had and how they incorporate that to define the threshold.
During the beginning of the semester, we have idea workshop sessions. So in 3 days, each of the group members will come with 10 different ideas. So in total, we have 140 ideas. Among 24 ideas, we have 5 ideas of perceptions, 3 ideas of extrusion, 2 ideas of control for magnification, 3 ideas of repetition, and 4 ideas of enclosure. So we found that the idea actually is limited.
Okay, so the first design stage of the studio is divided into 4 teams, and each of these teams took ideas and inspiration from the precedents and the idea workshop and developed them into their own pavilion idea. So first team is Team Jassa.
Okay, this pavilion, our case study was a driftwood pavilion, and we tried to incorporate the design into the circulation that was already present on the side, and how we can create some sort of circulation, turn it into our pavilion, and how the threshold itself can blur the boundary between the outside and inside space that we've been trying to create. And then we incorporated the case study we had in terms of structure. And when so the structure, the way it worked, we had some structural diaphragms which the blades would sit on and work as a bracing, and the whole structure would be connected to each other using a structural ring. And we also tried to incorporate how the threshold and skin itself could behave differently depending on what type of usage that is trying to put there.
Yeah.
The pavilion positioned at a prime location is a temporary articulated landscape, a space that's molded from the ground into partial screens that envelope a humble auditorium space. And the team will articulate the strict parameters of economics and circulations used, derived functional and effective form. The structure of the pavilion is the generation of its form. Generative lines of the pavilion is divided by vertical planes. Lines are drawn across the generative lines to form the roof surface and curved to interlock. And from this, we have 3 main concepts: so transparency, circulation, and economics.
Our case study is Dunescape designed by Shaw. The concept of the pavilion is to blur the internal and external boundary of the space. The continuity of the form creates multiple threshold conditions into the pavilion, providing an enclosure. The twisted plywood cladding plays with the translucency of the form, causing parts of the pavilion to dissolve and glimpse into the form from certain angles. The form began a perfect circle set within the constraints of 4 meters times 4 meters. The idea of using a circle was to allow us to pass through the form for pedestrian access without having to worry about the orientation of the edges. Creating adapts to the circle the spatial requirements of the providing presentation and the seating space causes variance in depth to the form. Using an anthropometric data to guide the design, the graduation of the surface allow multiple uses such as standing, sitting, and laundry.
combining this with the spatial requirements, we use the envelope to form the boundary that defines an enclosure.
And finally, it's Team Woda. And basically, we were looking at the idea of framing views through using plywood as material, bending it to create individual portals that would frame certain views, and then how we could use these portals to form a structure using circle packing, and how this could capture particular views or interior conditions through light. And then for the final iteration, it was basically looking at creating a space with an envelope that has a unique skin condition and expresses particular interior conditions or exterior conditions. So from there, we went to phase B, which involved taking the two winning designs from the competition stage and developing them as combined teams. So the Team Woda design was the first one to go through and combined with Team Hair, and together they formed Team Y.
So phase 1B, we just taking the main concept of light and orientating the views, and we incorporate our study of building economics and system to relate the form back to the site context. Due to limited time and the site constraints, the best way to optimize the form is to continue with the idea of manipulation views and give the design a better system to achieve the structure and the construction efficiency. So it's from the start with the sphere, and we just elevate the height to the inputs. So we got the attractor points to the views. So then finally we got our final form. So we decide our site circulation and the openings of our form. So we use the euro for the general form because we can reduce the modular site and to simplify the construction sequence. For the viewing, we got like two main views to the Teen Alley and the Union House. And for the functions, we got it like the functional space, and the viewing can just from internal to the external. And for the seating area, we just have their seatings like the extensions from inside to outside. As for the views, we now focus on the two main views, and the size and number of coins are varies from the different function needs. So developing from the initial coins, we simplify this as the cat-like coins. So in the process, we're developing the view panels, and we also from the solar study, we have the variations of the opening size, and also can have the maximize the reflection of light from the cat.
For the structure, we included a front and input system for this project. And the primary system is a stacked structure of box fan and sheet basins. And the secondary structure is shaded and wind device. And the structure logic is they have a gradual decrease in modularity for efficient structural performance. So the low is transferred from the top structural wind to the bottom module, and the back is and each modules is consist of 4 pieces of box fan, and they are interlocking with each other, and also the sheet basin. And the fluidity is 5 mil magnified and spool on the edge of the box fan, and also we have corner treatment for the on the corner because the length of the pieces is different. And it's the internal render of the project. This is the other render.
So from there, the design was Team Gia, and that went through to Team X's task.
So paths of circulation around the site are very vibrant due to all the activities around lecture rooms, classrooms, cafes, and everything. Students, staff are all welcome to be drawn towards the pavilion and interact with it. The pavilion ought to be a place for them to stay, relax, play, and enjoy. Within the required boundary, we were required to integrate space for 22 people. This generates a number of plans that accommodate the specifications driven by circulation. This is the form that we chose in the end because it addresses circulation, creates concave space for use, and it's an option for inside, outside. Ergonomics. To further extend our concept of providing users a comfortable and relaxing pavilion space, we decided to investigate into the study of ergonomics. Ergonomics of seating derived the datum levels of generated lines used to inform the parametric model of the pavilion. And transparency is also one of our concepts to carry on from Team Gia.
The form was continually optimized to reduce the amount of material playing with different color patterns of wood line. The seats, base, and roof are denser for functional and aesthetic reasons, while the rest are spaced out, increasing the transparency effect. The amount of curvature was also increased to further articulate the form.
And so one of the most appealing aspects of the original proposal by Team Gia was the interactivity, which is evident in the 1 to 20 models. As we moved to develop this idea, we began investigating jointing strategies that would enable structure that interacted with the users. So we looked into rubber detailing, casting, of all sorts, and began producing a series of iterations, many unsuccessful and some more so. For our first one-to-one prototype, we used these rubber inserts which gave flex to shearing forces. We incorporated into this one-to-one design here. So in these joints all on here and here, we have these rubber inserts which spring load the structure and bounce it back. Moving on from that prototype, we concluded that the shearing forces applied to the rubber. Oh, sorry, I'm speaking too soon.
So the next prototype we did was a 1:2 prototype. 1:2 prototype. So what we wanted to test is actually the chance stability. So previously you see like 4 sections, but this is actually twice the amount. There's 8 sections here. So we want to test how stable it is with 8 pieces. At the same time we want to test the bracing. This is the sitting. Previously it was no bracing, but John the engineer said yes, there has to be bracing for the structure to be stable and to be big. And that's what we tried. And we did it with a slider joint. So when you sit down, the slider joint actually moves back. As well as and in this roller form, we use the ABAC pattern, which is actually like A, B, A, and C is the packer. So A, B, A, and again a C a packer. So this one was highly successful. We reduced a lot of materials used. Yeah. However, one of the results showed that the action movement actually jammed up. All the sections actually move together, but what we want is actually a gradient in the sections. So when one person sits here, this side doesn't move as well. So what we do is actually we thought there's a need to create a transition movement in the joints, and that's how we thought of the washer joint. Occupational health and safety identifies hazards from unloading of material, cutting, making process, assembly process, installation, towards the end, the installation and storage.
some cross-bracing. The middle section with exaggerated deformation, you can see that it would sag. So we initially introduced additional members and then determined that we needed extra vertical members to keep it as a static. And then we looked at the local forces and ensured that any areas that were under large amounts of stress were in compression as to fit the material, and looking at where to introduce the additional bracing. And also, as the model could simulate the movement of people sitting on the design, we looked at how the structure itself actually moved when under pressure, and looked at some conditions where members would overlap and cause some possible ergonomics issues, which were addressed later. And then looking at the physical prototypes, we noticed there was some wrapping, and engineer determined that we should utilize some cross-bracing. So basically on the non-moving elements, we implemented steel cable cross-bracing to ensure no lateral movement. So we move to the final prototype.
When we did the final prototype, it was really nearer to the end of the design process. So we had to allocate like which part of the roller form use in a certain way. So the one part in gray is actually static, the part of the model is static. The part of the blue part is the bouncy roof movement. The green part is the chain link area right before you. And the red part is where the chain link area actually leads on to the static area. So we needed to make a transition zone, which is the red color part. Yep, so the list of things that we want to test is actually chunk by chunk, because at this point in time we decided to build the models in chunks. So this is one part of the prototype we have to test out. We also have to test out the spring loading and also the washer lines. And also this is the first time that we use hand drill to complete the entire process instead of by hand screwing in the bolts and the nuts.
Here's a exploded axle chick of our prototype over here. Okay, so you can see all our various joint types orientated within the model. Got the spring-loaded rubber joints here and here. Got washer joints along here and there. Got some dowel joints in the static areas, and then just some in joints there. So the final detail of the beam joint. We have, well, first of all, through our research, we came across T-nuts, and we thought that they would be a good solution for increasing the efficiency of our production. This enabled us to not have to stick our hands around and hold on to nuts and fiddle around and things like that. We could bang them into the back of it and then quickly just drive the bolt through to assemble it all. We were also noticing that as we tightened the joints, there was too much friction, which was dampening our movement. So we introduced little slip washers in between the elements, and then we've got the compression rubber and the steel pin. So another, can you flip back? There's one other detail which Rachel touched on earlier. This little pocket here, this is to accommodate the bulging of the rubber as the pin compressed it down to stop the elements from splitting apart. And another new detail was the spring loading of the joints to ensure that the design angle, resting angle of the joint, the rubber was already engaged at that point. It's sort of difficult to describe, but there's in the process of orientating the joints to the global model, we had a little rotation which enabled you assemble it at this angle, for example, and then as the dead load of the elements come together, the rubber's engaged, and if anybody was to come along and sit on it, there's already resistance. And so our final washer joint, using the T-nuts assembly process, we were forced to remove our second rubber dampener, and we just enlarged the dampener on the other side. Simple pin joints and our dowel joints. Now the dowel joints, we came to the conclusion that they were inappropriate for the final construction because we're trying to produce at a fast rate. The dowel joints sort of required clamping and
Time for the group to set.
time for the glue to set. And as you'll see on this prototype, it sort of came apart in a few areas as a result of us moving around in the process of and then for our little slider joints there. And so the chunk-to-chunk connection we haven't tested yet. We anticipated some difficulties with having to reach in and bolt together the sections of the base. So we came up with this solution, having this little round block piece which could just be placed there, and we just lifted the sections in and placed it on top, and then around the perimeter you could get your hands and using the spatula to bolt the chunks together.
So in terms of ergonomics, we task Pavilion section by section to analyze the size of the seat and the back. So because the original model is not suitable for people seat, and therefore based on study by ergonomic, we determine the size of concentrate. The seat is about 440 to 550 millimeter, and the height of the seat is around 380 to 550. We also want to make sure the movement concentrate which could provide people most comfortable movement. But the seat is still very hard to sit because of the straight edge, and it's not suitable for people. So we create a curve in the seat and the back seat based on the ergonomics to provide people a comfortable appearance. So the design of the concrete planes continue the logic of the pavilion. We want to create a kind of positive and negative effect to achieve a unique aesthetic. And we also want to create a concentrating atmosphere for the pavilion by using different material, the plywood and the concrete.
Global form is modified at a very fast pace, so OHS has to be at the same time analyzing the hazards and identifying them. So for example, the risk identified here is that the roof might be too low when somebody sits on it and it might hit the user's head. And here we've got a scissors hand, so when you grab the profile, it might cut your hand, which we have to eliminate. And same problem here. So the global form would provide iteration and to modify the form so there's no hazards potential. So that's the end.
For a real-life project, other than the design strategy, we also have to look into cost, schedule, and also OHS, just like what we have mentioned before. So this section will look into how cost and design strategy is having negotiations during the design process and the construction process. So we have some of the budget, which is shown in the yellow line, and the blue line is the estimated cost. And you can see by material change, cost, and everything, it starts to fluctuate. And then we zoom in. There are some major episodes. As you can see here, that the cost is increasing a huge amount due to the addition of a new portion for sensitive closure. So for this, in order to decrease the cost, we chose to source out cheaper fixings and then shrinking the overall size instead of abandoning the additional design portion. So by negotiating between the design intention and the cost and the structural stability ergonomics, so we make decisions by comparing the two values. And then there is always unexpected events happening, but though unexpected events happen, we still focus on the design strategy rather than cutting off the structural stability on the aesthetics of our project due to the cost. So this is how throughout the whole construction and design process, we have the negotiation between the design and the cost. And then you can see throughout the whole process, the design strategy is always prioritized. And the main cost cutter is, of course, to change hardwood into CD structural plywood. But due to our design intention of having a very structurally stable structure and also a nicer aesthetics of the whole pavilion, in the end, we still keep the whole design with hardwood. And after failure analysis of both design and cost, in the end we come up with just 200 deficit. So I think during this period we have made those crucial judgments based on design decision.
So basically, together the teams collaborated and using the same data sets produced the final outcome, which was developed through.
This is the global form which won the last competition. To create a sense of enclosure, we added an extension which we called the baby of the parent, which is essentially a smaller mirrored version of the parent. To follow the interlocking logic, we removed one of the unwanted root surfaces. Because of the way the joints work, the curves of the form cannot be too extreme, so the generative lines will be built to become smoother. The edges of the seat are cantilevered to articulate the edges, which are then tapered towards the end to allow space for bracings. The spine of the parent was extended to allow sufficient overlapping for joints. Bracings on the ends are removed for aesthetics. Following the sine and wind analysis, we found that the form had to be mirrored to be placed in the optimum position. The baby was too flat, so we grew a little. The form was then molded to fit into the side. At this point, we found that the pavilion was very much over budget, with the estimated number of sheets at 31. We needed to get it down to 24 sheets. Because we found that the baby was far too big proportionally, the size was greatly reduced. The pavilion was shifted to the corner of the side to allow for circulation. With more adjustments, it was now within budget. We criticized the shape of the baby. Is it a seat or something to lean on? Pulling the back out essentially turns into a wall to lean on, which might cause it to topple, so we pushed it back down to keep it stable. We looked at the structure. Based on the 1:1 prototype, the seats and structure were adjusted for movement. For safety, the spine of the parent was adjusted so that it cannot be grabbed. The roof was protruding at the height of people's backs, which was fixed. Some bracings were too long, were adjusted. Since we found the 1:1 prototype that the moving seat was too deep, the seat was made shorter. The roof was too low, providing not enough headroom. Due to material length limitation, we cannot raise the roof further. So the shape of the seat was adjusted instead. To reduce the number of small pieces at the ends, the pieces are merged together. Additional bracings are added to ensure stability.
Now we move to the global form logic. So actually, in this pavilion, we have 4 types of logic, which is actually, this is the global form logic, the main logic, and we have the profiling members logic, which is this one, and we have the fabricator logic, and we have the clash analysis to ensure that our experience and no clash between them. So this is the detail of the global form logic, which generates from the inputs from the first situation. And so this is actually why, what I said, as I said earlier, that bifurcation form is actually essential rather than having this circular ending here. And because like we want to generate this as the basic of our main logic, because from this point we extract a plane here, and after that we move this plane and divide this to become each point and join that to become our rule surface in our pavilions. So and after that, what can you go ahead? So actually cooling pattern is the most important of the global form logic, because this defines what is actually between this member and this member, and it's actually we start to introduce the packers of the pavilions. It's also introduced by this cooling pattern, because by having these packers we can have more transparency and reduce the material. So this is the bone member logic. The bone member logic was actually developed because of John's. John suggested us to refine the fixings to make it bigger, thickening, so that we can have more structural stability in the process because of this load test process. And also this bone member logic is actually to provide us more ergonomics in the form itself, as well as giving more beauty. So after that, we introduce this moving bone member logic, which is actually to allow us understand like how big is actually the distance that could be achieved through this movement from this logic. So, and we have also normal member logic, which is actually in some part like this area, that does not have direct contact to the programs or for people, because we want to reduce the amount of materials that's been used. That's why we use this member logic, normal member logic. And the last part is the bifurcation member logic, which is actually where the bifurcation is located, so that it is actually connected to each other. And so this is the packer and joints logic. And finally, this is the clash member analysis logics, where we could understand where is actually the location of the clash, so that we could manage to avoid what kind of clash will be happening in the future.
So earlier, we intended to use 24mm hardwood ply, which weighs about 43 kilograms per sheet, exceeding the limit of 40 kilograms for 2 people to carry. Therefore, from OH&S studies, we intended to reduce the thickness to 18mm plywood. So that weighs about 35 kilograms, sufficient enough for 2 people to carry. And that's how we divided the pavilion into chunks. So each chunk is below 40 kilograms. And for chunks between 35 kilograms to 40 kilograms, we suggest 2 people to carry, so it doesn't hurt anybody. And dimension of the chunks, so that's the maximum dimension that 2 people will be carrying.
So to ensure the logic behind each of these chunks, checking protocols were established. So the first one was tested through the 1-to-5 prototype.
Yeah. So for the 1-to-5 prototype was our first physical check. So in this one, we were checking on the assembly sequence, the chunk connections, and whether there were any missing components, labeling of the grasshopper, and also testing out the aesthetics of the. So our first global form, when it was first baked, we found that there were missing points. We were quite prepared to put it in manually, but we found that there was an error with the script. There was a pattern. We had a meeting on day 14, which was on a Sunday, with Paul and David to address these issues and decide whether we had to put it in, which we did. And so we had to do a manual generative curve on the rule so that we would get an even line across when we take it out the things in. The process took us a bit longer than we expected, so we unassembled about 4 or 5, and by the end of the night it was still not done. So day 15 we finished all our chart assembly.
I thought that was really good, and I think the result is fantastic. And it's never been seen, it's to be celebrated. So well done on the whole team. The way the whole team came together pleasantly surprised me as well. And that's probably endorsing the way that you structured it as well as the tutors. My question though to you is, you presented a lot of information. Can you, and I'm talking to everyone who the students, can you identify for me the three key moments, or 3 key moments, not B3, but 3 key moments in the process that where you learned something and a light bulb was switched on and they enabled you to progress? 3 key things. And I'm looking at you, but I'm listening to the whole team, and I don't mind who answers.
I would say bone member, one of them. Bone member, one of them. Bone member.
The connections.
One of them.
The idea of the bifurcation, how it created a sense of enclosure, because before it was really linear, and that sense of feeling. So once we added the baby jump to it, actually created a sense of enclosure. Sorry?
The form.
The form, yes.
I would say maybe 13 people.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that's one of the most
It's one of the very hard things to do. But I think if working with people who aren't working with you is a problem, but everyone else was very
So did everyone make an effort to learn a feature of the strengths and weaknesses, or
yeah.
you need to manage them?
You need to know who can walk, and then who can help who will walk. And that's how you pair people up. Like, can you help me with that because you're done with your thing? I'll take over. And you help me with that.
Taking a while to sort that out, or was it constantly changing, or did you get that right?
Because I had time at the start of the semester we had a few team formations. So through that process, you learn people who can do what. You learn to observe people. And so after all that process at the start, you just, you experiment with it. And then people will feedback to you that, oh, you know, this person, she's doing this, but she's better doing this, so you know.
Are you all still friends?
Friends, remain friends, but professionally, you have to be serious about stuff.
Yeah.
This is from the studio coordinator. Studio coordinator is more like team, so for me it's more like the communication between teams, because each team has their own schedule, and sometimes schedule has to negotiate between each other. Just like documentation team, it has to be ahead of assembly so that the information can be feedback to the assembly team. So I guess communication between teams is also one of the most important.
Probably the most important. Provided the principles of it. I'm glad you said that, because I think that's probably the most important. One of the most important.
Yeah, congratulations. Amazing collaboration, including the presentation, superbly and professionally orchestrated.
Was that all rehearsed? Or
and no stone unturned. I was sort of writing down questions as you went, and in the next kind of chapter, the question is addressed and encountered. So most of my questions that I'm left with is how people used it and reacted to it, and have there been any surprises there? I was just wondering about the interactive kind of responsive side of it, that subtle responsive side. Did people get a surprise? I haven't actually got a second yet.
I mean, that aspect of it hasn't actually been 100% successful. Actually, there was a bit of an oversight with the attempts to maximise the movement of the roof. We were unaware that we were increasing the leg run and making it a whole lot more difficult to actually move the structure. But it's quite flexible and it's interesting, but I haven't had any feedback from it.
We'll get a chance afterward to go out after the Q&A because we're also going to have drinks up there on the Pavilion.
And what's the life expectancy?
That's a good question, actually.
1 month.
How long do you have to site?
Well, originally the intention is to only stay for a month.
Right. So it's weathering wasn't something that people talk about that much. I mean, it was great to see all the fantastic kind of testing to construction. I mean, very nostalgic for our education to be able to continue to smash things. People didn't talk that much about weathering. So I guess that's part of the growth of the temple.
Another question would be, at what point does this turn into a pavilion and different furniture? At what point is it furniture? At what point is it? What is the difference? Or is it the same?
We discussed this at the end of your first phase competition.
Well, again, like we're talking about a sense of enclosure, and once, because with the furniture itself, someone goes and sits on it, what we try to do is to incorporate some sort of interaction into it. That's something that draws people in, and that's one of the values and characteristics that we found in the Pavilion, and how you actually sculpt the space inside of it. That's something that we've been trying to work on, and that's how we see us moving away from just being a bench. And also we incorporate lots of intelligence into it, something that normal furniture probably won't go that much into detail. We try to create different types of feelings inside. For example, we have different types of usages. The height of each seat changes, so we try to create some sort of ambiguity inside how people would actually respond to it, and that's something we're looking forward to actually. Sometimes the Pavilion is trying to make you lean onto it, sometimes you have to sit on it. So we're trying to encourage different type of views that we believe that the Pavilion should provoke.
You know what you could do? Put a camera, but you might. I don't know if it's illegal, it's still good. Get a camera, because I just saw a person out there before touching it and having a look. They weren't quite sure what they were looking at, but they touched it and realised.
People keep on coming up and asking questions.
It'd be nice to put a camera there and capture that in a legal way. I don't know if we'll do this, but
And there's also like, do you see it as an object or do you see it as an environment?
I think one of the feedbacks we got from people on the site was that, they were surprised it's going to be removed because they felt like it fit in there. So I think that just takes away the object quality from it, makes it more part of the space, and it's more about the spatial characteristics that it creates.
Well, I think it's both, but yeah, just a question. And also, I guess, in terms of like the time aspect, like during the day and also during the night, like is there also a consideration?
We did actually sort of plan to house the lighting inside the concrete room, so it creates a different aura at night. So that people are still drawn to it.
Because like when you have those time lapses at night, there was I think some opportunities there to become those areas where they're all involved. And also in terms of materiality, is there any consideration between the grain grade went this way and also vertically. So you've got some going vertically.
In the final project, we made sure all the sheets are nested along the grain. So we eliminated that in the final project.
Did you get covered all on the same machine?
Yeah.
The different drill bits, we broke 3 different drill bits, had a couple of accidents, no one died, that's a good thing. But yeah, but again, one of the things that was brought out was the small packets that you have in front of you. They usually tended to get sucked up by the suction of the dust collector, and then that would engage in the drill bit itself, and then the drill bit would just snap. So we were testing the machine for a while, and it took us 2 down cutters, and while we were cutting the foam, like the drill bit again broke, so that kind of also stopped how fast we were fabricating. So there was always problems coming up that we had to change some of the drill bits, go around things a bit.
When did these scale models get made? Is that sort of, are these sort of presentation tools, or are these really testing things out? Because I just sort of note that things really, especially this one on the bench here, things really start to twist, like you've got this bit of wire that's structured, so the connections aren't acting like they don't scale up in any way or scale down the same models. So when were they made, and sort of what purpose did they serve? And how did you test it out? Sorry, I didn't start the presentation.
For the 1 to 5 prototype, we started off with just connecting every layer with 1 wire. And then we thought of this 1 to 5 prototype can also act as testing the sequence how to put layers together. Right. So we change how they're connected together by 3 layers and stimulate how pin joints should be. But then it's too loose.
Yeah,
so, but then, yeah, we try to stimulate it how the whole thing is going to be constructed in the real world.
Yeah.
So the 1 to 5 prototype doesn't really just be a representation. It also tested out how the layering of works.
Can I just say, before the 1 to 5, there's the 1 to 10 models, and at the very first stage of the competitions, that's the one that's been picked out. And because the model actually moves, so it's because of the wiring inside it. The ideas of this movement actually develops from that model. So curiously, the models actually are actually generating some ideas at the competition stage.
Yes, this twisted in this point.
If I maybe ask the team, I just want to go back to the second of the first question, because Mo already asked about the first question, which is what is experience, object, ground, etc. So I want to maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you think about digital practice, because you frame the question as what is digital practice? What do you learn from this process? Because what you're showing us is a lot of digital workflow, a lot of errors, identifying errors, manual cutting, manual generative line work. So I'm kind of curious to know what do you take away from the studio as a form of practice?
I guess in terms of looking at the workflow aspects, sort of expanding on how we were talking about, like the main aspects we drew from this was the collaborative sort of aspect. I found like working with a digital workflow, it really gives that sort of bottom-up approach where sort of the ideas and like the material, the tectonics of the material carry forward through each stage of the design, and it sort of allows for the easy collaboration of ideas working with the same digital models. So I feel like, working in this way, like perhaps if we had this sort of top-down approach and looked at designing the form first, the sort of materiality of the design would probably never have emerged.
And also the digital side allowed us to test so many things. Like you can see, we have so many prototypes, I think one of the main things that sped up the whole thing is that we actually could make small changes on the file and then try it again. And we could do that in many different scales and different material. So I think that digital gives us the flexibility again, as Will said. We were trying to incorporate it not because it was digital, we were trying to make it digital, we were trying to push the materiality and test different things, so that can help us with coming up with a final solution. Otherwise, it probably would have taken us a lot of time to fabricate it, and then if you want to go back and make changes, then we would need all manual. So it was less control of the process, and the outcome might have been not as clear.
You were not reading the sequence, and you sort of focused on boundaries. This is actually quite amazing. Showing that the initial model I went through it seems that it actually seems to reach a form, and you're sort of doing small changes based on the environment, ergonomics, form, sunlight, shadow, budget, and so on. And I think that was really probably my favorite part of your presentation. That was really, really good. So I really congratulate you for the result. I think it's a really amazing piece, an amazing achievement. And your question, I was going to ask something similar because I feel like I can't really critique the design because it's done. And I think it's really a great way to learn how a project sort of starts from being really. That would be small practice and you can just see everything unfolds and you have all these problems along the way and you're just solving problems the whole time. And I think that's a really great thing to learn when you're really, really privileged to have access to a studio like this, to actually be able to experience how it's actually designed and build something from beginning to end. I guess the question I had for you is, could you have done something differently, or would you do something different looking back now? Is there anything you could improve, anything you could have done better?
Well, I think once we made the prototype, again, we made small prototypes, those there, and then once we assembled the whole thing, it still behaved slightly differently than what we expected. So I was talking to my friend and I said, only if there was another way we could incorporate some things such as friction, for example, something that makes the virtual world more real. So I would have loved to explore that a bit more. We probably didn't have enough time to explore that deeper, but if we could have more things on the computer, once we moved to the real world, probably would have more resolved outcome.
But isn't there value in understanding the detail? You don't want a computer to tell you whether it's wrong or not.
Well, again, like we were talking about controlling the form, for example, how easy it was for us to control things. If we had the material characteristics on the computer, and they would say, well, we did like the wood testing in the engineering faculty, but again, the computer might have told us, you don't need to go all the way there. Like we could have saved some material somewhere else.
Yeah, just talking about engineering principles,
When you start construction, you went through all the problems that happened.
Yes.
You would see, okay, it was the wrong thickness, or it was the wrong type of rubber, or there's all these things that happen during the construction process that you just have to, very quickly make a decision and manually build it or order something new. So you can't just take away the whole human component.
That was quite interesting. It was quite interesting because I was reading Nari the other day. Nari talked about the absolute information models of mathematics and how far the digital prototype always has a discrepancy with the physical work. The architecture of building are not a product design system. You will never be product design because you will never have 10,000 iterations before you start pressing button, because your building always have different environmental constraints, material constraints, etc. So it's interesting. Yeah, there's a number of projects that has very similar aesthetics to it.
It's flexible and it's movable. Have you thought about in the beginning the design perspective? The pavilion would have been, I guess, you speak about being interactive, but maybe did you think about it moving at all, or having arms that could sort of, I don't know, be moved around, for example?
We did think about it, but I think it's something that
It's all being shut down.
yeah.
Just wondering.
They want everything to move. Like, don't move anything.
The power of the project is probably in like the combination of the digital craft and the rules. I think that beyond the currency of these institutions, it's like taking that documentation into practice is what I think we should really take on board. Because like the processes are like, yeah, something that you should really take on board. Because we've done it all here now, and you should document it as a way of practicing.
I think it's a beautiful thing. It was great to see the workflow. I mean, the presentation is thorough. So that was great. But I guess there's I found myself looking at the models and just seeing that it's almost like the decision to manufacture it out of ply was taken at the very beginning, so that informed the aesthetic. And now you're kind of at this end point where you've got all this beautiful modelling and digital fabrication and process of how to construct this thing,